And we're live. What's up, folks? Matthew Bellman and Ryan Kostrowski with the DFS 5-pack. Of course, we're not talking about DFS. We're just here to talk about some sports in general. We'll just run through 10 different topics, give our thoughts and opinion on the situation, and just kind of have a little fun. How are you holding up in quarantine over there?
Man, it is rough. I told you I hurt my foot, so I've been really cooped up. My foot's like finally pretty much better, so I'm gonna start like walking and stuff again, either tomorrow or Monday. I just haven't wanted to like do anything because like that just makes it worse. So just been really cooped up, man. Sam and I at each other's throats. We're at each other's throats. Like I'd say we get along great, like 85% of the time, but we're at each other's throats like 15% of the time, and there's really nowhere to go. Yeah, our house is like big enough to get away, but it's not like, I mean, there's like the bedroom and the other room. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with it. I was actually listening to some statistical breakdowns yesterday of the number of couples who are fighting throughout this quarantine. They've actually done research on the subject, and it's worse for like couples 40 and under because they just haven't had a lot of time like this where they've spent alone. Older couples who have been together longer, it's not quite as bad, but there's a lot of people struggling. I just think that's human nature. If you're cooped up with somebody, and we've talked about this, I was married for most of the last 10 years, and what would happen like if Nikki and I were still living in the same house? Like, it'd be nice not to be lonely, but I'm sure we would be fighting just like everybody else. Like, it's a tough time to be alone. It's also a tough time to be with somebody.
Yeah, it's tough for everyone because there's nowhere to go. There's just nowhere to go to get space. So it's frustrating, but everyone's dealing with it. Um, I
Like,
have
I was going to say, we all know I have a very high opinion of myself, but I would be sick of myself right now if I was anybody else who had to be living with me for this long a period of time. Like, I wouldn't blame anybody who's like, this dude's got to get out of my face.
I've had a couple buddies come over. We've just really hung out outside. One of my buddies though came over for the draft. So trying to, I don't want to, start going back to reality too soon, but at some point you got to start doing some things.
Told you my sister hadn't seen another human being in almost a month, and I went down to Milwaukee last weekend with my kids. I'm like, I don't know if technically this isn't supposed to what we're doing, but she hasn't seen a person in a month. Like, she's not even going to the grocery store or anything like that. I'm like, I will get some semblance of reality. We went and visited her, went hiking down the Milwaukee area, and then came back the next day. Again, I don't know if we're supposed to or not supposed to, but you got to have a little bit of reality.
For sure.
Otherwise, we're going to lose our minds. So we'll do our little part right here to help a few of you guys just kind of have something sports related to talk about. I know the draft has been up for a lot of people. That has helped to, unless you're a Green Bay fan, helped give you something to cheer on and cheer for. And we will do our thing right here. So again, thumbs up is always appreciated. Subscribe to the station if you're new to it. I do want to give a shout out to a customer of ours, Ryan Monks, who once again just out of the kindness of his heart just sent a little donation over to the team right now. We thank you, Ryan. We appreciate that. We're living on scraps over here. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Yeah, cool.
All right. So let's go to a question that I brought up. This is one from me. And my question for you is, you're a GM in the NBA right now. You are using the body of work that both of these young men, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, have showed us so far. You're aware of everything about them. If I told you right now you have the 8th pick in the NBA redraft or whatever pick it is, and these two guys are up there for you, which one would you choose to build around and why?
So I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm a much bigger Embiid fan than I am Simmons.
Okay.
Much bigger. I love Embiid. I love everything about him. I love his personality, et cetera, et cetera. However, the answer to your question is Simmons.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, Embiid is probably the slightly better talent, and I love his alpha mindset, his alpha qualities. The injury concern alone, however, like sways this heavily in Simmons' favor. And while everyone wishes Simmons had a better jumper, he's elite in every other regard. First team all defense, if not defensive player of the year this year. He's a skinnier, smaller version of Giannis with better court vision. He's a guy that you would love to build around. Him and Embiid don't necessarily fit well together. But if you're telling me I could build around Simmons, his numbers would be insane. The answer is Simmons here. What do you think?
I thought it was very close because I think we are very much in the same camp on every single way that we think about this. I would go with Embiid, and the only difference to me is I don't think Ben Simmons is the number one on a championship type team. And if you're building your roster this way, I don't think you get another pick for like 45, maybe 50 players. And I don't know if that I'm going to get a good enough number two. Like if you told me I could pair Ben Simmons with Bradley Beal, which is actually another question that we're going to get into a little bit later, I'd be good with it because then I'd have a guy I could give the ball to. 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter that could create his own shot at kind of an elite level. I don't know that I'm going to get that. Now, I'm with you. The injury concerns with Joel Embiid is real, but I think Simmons just doesn't have what it takes to be the top dog on a championship caliber team. I think Embiid could be. And I think you're right. If there was no injury concerns, the answer would easily be Embiid, but I at least want to take a shot. I can get a couple good seasons out of him. But the safer long-term answer, I can't disagree with you until you're wrong.
I do think that you'd get like a Bradley Beal type with that next pick, CJ McCollum.
But if you're running it back, well, for me, there's a difference between Bradley Beal and CJ McCollum. You could maybe get into McCollum to go with him. We'll see. But you might, for like the late second round, because if you're taking Simmons, say 12th overall or whatever it might be.
Well, there is no like there you didn't put like what number are we taking him overall, so it's hard to.
I think that's where he's going to go because after Giannis and KD and Harden and those guys go, I think that's where you end up. But I mean, I could be wrong.
I get what you're saying. For me, it's Simmons, and it's easier than I wanted it to be.
Okay. And this is why I thought it was a good question because we've talked about this before in the past. And there are, because we are very close in what we're thinking. Your just conclusion is you're taking the safer bet, the guy that I know is still playing in 3 years. Whereas in 3 years, if Embiid's health was out of the league, I don't think anybody's going to be flabbergasted by that.
Exactly.
So I get your choice. I don't think you're wrong. I'm taking a shot on that one that we can get more years out of him.
I get that.
All right. Next up. So we kind of build these questions just because obviously, we're going to run out of things to talk about after a while. And which of these packs of 3 NBA players would you choose? Now, to read them off for people who aren't actually watching, set 1 is Chris Middleton, Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox. Next one up is Giannis, Markelle Fultz, and LaMarcus Aldridge. Then, kind of something alluded to earlier, Brad Beal, Ben Simmons, and Brook Lopez. And the last one is Devin Booker, Jamal Murray, and Mitchell Robinson. I actually have 2 answers, and the reason is I wasn't sure, and maybe you can help me out here. Are we playing like a 3-on-3 basketball tournament right now? Or do I get these 3 dudes and then I get, 2 other people to start with them and then 7 bench players?
The latter.
Okay. Because that changes my answer. And what I mean by that is if we were playing strictly a 3-on-3 Gus Macker type of format, I would go with Bradley Beal, Ben Simmons, and Brook Lopez. I think those guys complement one another. I got Simmons who can run defense on all these guys. Lopez can shoot threes and protect the rim. And then Bradley Beal can be my guy to get him to take a shot. However, if you told me that we're building a full NBA team, I'm going to go with Giannis, Fultz, and LaMarcus Aldridge. The reason being is Aldridge can be a bit of a stretch forward to let Giannis have his room in the paint. But also, he's the best player out here by a pretty good margin, and I want to build around a superstar.
I get that. I figured he might go there. So the answer is just funny. I'm not going to reverse it because the Beal, Simmons, Lopez for me isn't really in consideration. If I'm doing like a 3-on-3 tournament, it's Giannis side for me just because Giannis is so dominant. You don't really need 3-point shooting in 3-on-3 tournaments. So give me the Giannis side in a 3-on-3 pickup style tournament. And like what I'm saying though, like you get these 3 guys as foundation pieces in your NBA team. I wanted to put Giannis in there, like, because obviously the 2 with Giannis are worse. Now, maybe I made them a little bit better than I should have. But for me, it's a tie with 2 teams. And it's neither of the ones you mentioned. It's the first one and the last one. I like the first one a lot. I think it's the most balanced. 3, like, not superstars, but all-stars. 3 of them right there. 3 potential perennial all-stars. So I lean to the first one. However, I really like the last one as the most upside. Booker and Jamal Murray together. Obviously, we know they both play point guard and shooting guard. And I think Mitchell Robinson has a ton of upside, even with the Knicks, but especially if he got away from the Knicks and it was in a situation like this. I'm a big Mitchell Robinson fan. I know you are too. So I thought maybe you'd go there. But
now, I'm going to be honest with you with Mitchell Robinson. He isn't a guy that directly affects winning NBA games that much right now, and we like a lot of his potential. And I think a lot of our love for him comes from his DFS numbers. I can't sit here and tell you I've watched enough of the New York Knicks to evaluate him as an overall talent, to think that he's even on the same level as like a LaMarcus Aldridge, who has been a perennial all-star.
I mean, I'd rather have Mitchell Robinson,
going forward. Is this a 5-year plan or is this just this year?
Well, 5 years, I'd rather have Mitchell Robinson. This year, I'd rather have Aldridge, but I was kind of looking at like
that question as well.
As these are your building blocks for the next few years.
Okay. And I get that. I think Markelle Fultz is a bit of a wild card, right? He's been a lot better this year and a lot better for Orlando. But is this kid going to continue to grow? Or is he kind of just this all that he is like a solid NBA player?
I put him on the same exact category as Mitchell Robinson.
Totally different players, but I don't disagree with your statement.
For sure. They're both wild cards with upside.
Yeah. I think ultimately we viewed it a little bit differently, but the one thing we can agree on is, I mean, I'm a big Devin Booker fan. You're probably a little bit bigger of a Ben Simmons fan, but we all know that Giannis is just on a different stratosphere than the rest of the players out here, because if Giannis ends up on the Mount Rushmore of NBA, we still think that's possible. There isn't anybody else out here who you think will even ever be in consideration for top 10 all-time NBA player.
Agreed. But still, what about the first one? Because that's where I lean.
It's very well balanced. But still, give me the superstar in Giannis going forward. If I'm building my team, I want the guy that sets me apart from the others. Because I like the Beal, Simmons, Brook Lopez one is like the way that they play off of one another right now. I mean, you got a lot of defensive flexibility, 3 very good defenders right there. All right, you still with me?
I'm with you.
All right. Next question up. All time, and I'm talking way back into the late 1800s, and again, we can't sit here and tell you that I haven't watched Mickey Mantle play basketball or baseball, for example, but how would you rank your top 5 MLB position players of all time? Obviously, we need to run off statistics a little bit right here because we're not going to have seen a lot of these guys. What was your ranking 1 through 5?
So this was tough, man, because I feel like I had to give credit to the older guys, even though I never really saw them play. So
3 guys on my list are guys I've never seen play.
So the guys that made my list are Babe Ruth, because he has to make anyone.
Is he number 1?
I mean, I didn't really rank him. I just listed top 5. I feel like he has to make any top 5 list. As does Hank Aaron.
Ooh, I do not have Hank Aaron.
Willie Mays.
Have him.
Ted Williams.
Have him.
And Barry Bonds.
Have him. The only difference between us is I went Mike Trout over Hank Aaron.
I get that. I thought about Mike Trout. It's hard for me to judge Mike Trout versus Hank Aaron versus Lou Gehrig. You know what I mean? It's difficult.
Gun to head, who would you put number 1?
Bonds.
All right, so I put Bonds 3, and I knocked him a little bit for the obvious steroid use. I put Babe Ruth as 1, and I was debating between him and Willie Mays. Willie Mays is great, awesome defender. I mean, in the beginning of his career, he was stealing bases like no other. I believe he now ranks 4th on the all-time home run list. I think 660, so clearly he could do a little bit of everything. But I put Babe Ruth at number 1, and the difference to me is Babe Ruth was so much better than everybody else that he played around. And I don't know exactly, what if he was around in baseball 30, 40 years later. He probably wouldn't have 40 more home runs than the second place guy in a single season, but he was a man amongst boys out there. The difference between him and everybody he played with is just so much greater than anybody else.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, he was the first guy I listed too. So if you want to say that that's number 1, sure. Any one of these lists has to have Babe Ruth.
He also didn't use PEDs. He used performance de-enhancing substances instead. So, what would this guy have done on steroids? Who even really knows? That's why I had him number 1. Barry Bonds is the best that I've ever seen, but we all know he cheated. And so it's how do you take that into the equation?
He was already amazing before that, though. So
he was.
About that. The other thing about Babe Ruth, the counter argument is how good would Babe Ruth be today?
Probably amazing. That's my thought is this. You know how we talked about Michael Jordan and how he was not a great three-point shooter, but if he played in the modern NBA, he would have made himself a great three-point shooter?
At some point, though, in my opinion, like, guys are bigger, faster, stronger.
Sure, and I don't think Babe Ruth, because there are seasons when Babe Ruth was hitting like 50 home runs, and the guy who in second place was like 12. Like,
right.
I don't think Babe Ruth is hitting 300 home runs while second place has 50. But if he was that much better than everybody he played with while doing nothing but smoking cigars and drinking alcohol, what if he had grown up in this culture where great athletes were taught how to take care of their bodies? Would he have been a man amongst boys? It's possible. We have no way of knowing.
Okay, good point.
So that's I forget what sportscaster brought that up. He goes, but I often judge athletes like how were they among their generation. And again, like with Wilt Chamberlain, it seemed like a half a foot taller than everybody else that was out there, but there are other 7-footers out there these days. So it's tough to evaluate these things, but that's why it's fun to talk about.
For sure.
So I ranked them Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Barry Bonds, Ted Williams, Mike Trout. I think Trout definitely can move up that list as his career lengthens. And I think Ted Williams, if he hadn't left for a while to fight in a war, may have been farther up the list because for me, he's kind of like the Tim Duncan in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like I feel like his name doesn't get brought up enough, but he was as good as all these guys.
Yeah, talk about like pure hitters. He might be the best.
Yes. Ted Williams was amazing. Clearly, I've never seen him, but just go look at his baseball reference statistics. Like, it's just number one rankings all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hate the next question. Initial thoughts on the Green Bay Packers draft. I think to call it trash is almost an insult to trash. I am with every other person that I've seen on social media, Twitter, Facebook. I'd like to say talk to in real life, but that's nobody because we can't leave our houses. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't understand. We were in the NFC Championship last year against a team that was better, and we go and draft positions of strength. I mean, I'll admit Aaron Rodgers doesn't look like as good as he was 5 years ago, but to think he doesn't play or have a couple more seasons in him, I don't understand it in the slightest. And I think the top thing, and Shannon Sharp said this the other day, it's like they're trying to repeat history. You know what I mean? By taking a quarterback in the late first round that could learn under Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years and take over. The difference is Aaron Rodgers was widely considered the number one overall pick that fell into the late 20s. Retraded up for a guy that was still going to be there 4 picks later. And I don't understand it.
A couple things. So one, I'm just going to touch on the running back situation.
Yeah, that one either.
Okay, so first, I'm just going to say, A.J. Dillon, who they got, is a beast. He is good. And we talk about running backs. He is an upgrade over Jamal Williams as what that will be. So it is what it is. I still don't get it, though, because you're obviously set at that position. So it's not just about how good he is. As far as Jordan Love goes, I had heard that Matt LaFleur, because that's just what I'm hearing after, is in love with him. I just don't get it, man. It's not even just about picking the guy there. Give Aaron Rodgers some help. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm fuming right now. I got to imagine he doesn't have too many seasons left in Green Bay. I really feel like he's gone.
Yeah, and I don't even know what his contract extension is or how he could be out of there or what they're thinking. I feel like, correct me if you would disagree with me, but Matt LaFleur and Gutekunst are maybe feeling themselves right now, having turned this franchise around pretty quickly. They picked up the new GM 2 years ago. I've liked a lot of his moves up until this season. Did some great things in free agency last year, bringing over the Smith brothers. Obviously, Matt LaFleur showing how bad of a coach Mike McCarthy was, really kind of flipped the organization around last year. Do you think this is a case of these two guys are feeling themselves right now and they're not giving any credit to Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers?
Potentially, yeah, and that's scary because a lot can change in 1 year, and sometimes don't bite the hand that feeds you.
We got this team to turn around, so maybe we need to get rid of Aaron and move on from them and do the guys that we like. When it's I don't know, man. I kind of feel like that was a case of their egos coming out. I don't know. It's weird. Jerry Krause is single-handedly thinking he's the reason that the Bulls are good, not Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it's funny.
A very mini version of that, but yes.
Man, I'd be upset too if I were a Packer fan. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it just really makes no sense.
It doesn't, and this seems to be like this isn't a case where there seems to be an argument. I haven't seen one person defend these decisions so far.
I mean, I'm reading a narrative out there that some people think Aaron Rodgers is done. Thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we've seen obviously a slippage in play, which happens to a lot of people as they get to their mid-30s and even beyond that. Watching him last year, he didn't look like the guy that won 2 MVPs and probably should have 3 or 4 realistically. But you still saw a well above average quarterback who was throwing to one very good wide receiver. His connection with Devontae Adams is real, and then you gave him a whole bunch of nobodies. And what do you expect his completion percentage to be? To really, really bad. I mean, the number of drops by Geronimo Allison. I mean, if you put anything around him, I still think he's a well above average quarterback. Maybe not MVP level, but still well above average.
This draft had some monster wideouts too. I just don't get it. Like every mock I read pretty much had them projected to take a wideout with their first pick. I mean, look what Denver did. Like taking, arguably the best wideout in round 1 and Judy, who I talked about on one of the other videos we made, and then coming back in round 2 with another like speedy wideout. So I think that getting weapons for your quarterback is important, and they have not drafted a skill position
15 guy. Years.
That's insane. Man, Aaron Rodgers to New England potentially. I feel like also like whatever his contract is, like if he's the type of guy that if he wants out, like he's gone. Like he just has enough, I just can't imagine like if he wants out, him staying in Green Bay and Green Bay like, not getting rid of him for how much he's done for them.
I mean, I can't argue with any of that. This just it doesn't make any logical sense. Again, I haven't seen one opinion on Twitter or Facebook. And again, that's not where I think you're going to get the greatest opinions of all time. But not one thing where I'm like, that's a different way of looking at it. Maybe I kind of like this. Nothing.
The other thing about like trying to rewrite history, it ended up working well for Green Bay because both, Rodgers ended up being amazing. But I don't think that was correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think that was like a really like Rodgers and Favre had the best of friendships. I think Rodgers resented that he didn't start for so long, and he's going to resent now that they drafted someone else there to take his job.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference to me was like Rodgers was a guy who a lot of people thought was the number 1 overall pick, and when you're sitting there in the 20s and this dude just keeps falling, and you have an aging quarterback who has hinted at retirement, and you're like, wow, how do you not take this guy? That just made sense. Like that just happened to be like adjusting to the draft that around you. When we do year-long fantasy drafts, you always say you have to let the draft come to you. That draft, he came to them. This is like you legitimately went out of your way to spite him. I think this could be historically bad moving forward.
Same. For me, it's like these are the type of moves that really can just demoralize a franchise.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense to me.
I don't want to be hyperbolic and a prisoner of the moment, and the Packers could easily go out next year, and Jordan Love could be great moving forward. In a couple of years, maybe this is good for him, and that's fine. But you want to know what? I just feel like it's still like a desperate attempt to copy something that was 15 years ago.
I feel like that's the point now with Green Bay. It almost seems like they're moving on with this current team, and they are trying to get younger because it's not even about like, like this is about Jordan Love, and they think that he can be the guy. I mean, whenever you take a quarterback in the first round like that, like they expect him to be the guy. And obviously not this year, maybe not next year, but it's baffling to me.
I've never understood it. And we've drafted multiple quarterbacks while Aaron Rodgers has been the franchise quarterback. Why are you ever using a draft pick on a quarterback? Pick up some guy. Because the thing is, once Aaron Rodgers is hurt, like you're not winning anymore anyway. Pick up a guy. You can pick up a veteran quarterback who can be a backup and give you the same. Like we took Brian Brom however many years ago that was. That didn't make any single sense. I think we took 2 quarterbacks in that draft, and one of them was Matt Flynn as well. We took Brett Hundley the other year. Like, what was the point of that?
Now this, like on the other hand, if he turns out to be like, I mean,
Patrick
I'm not.
Mahomes.
No one's going to be like Mahomes, but yeah, like if he turns out to be like, better than Aaron Rodgers is right now, like obviously not, if he turns out to be another quarterback like Green Bay has had, then like they made the right move. Because if you can get that guy, it doesn't matter how you get him. So
historically, that's rare though, and I think that's the point we're both
making. Agreed. Like I don't expect that here, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough. It sucks to be a Green Bay fan right now.
Every Green Bay fan I've seen on social media is pissed, and you all just have the right to be. Because even if this works out, I think it works out not because it was the smart move. Like it just happened to work out. You got lucky that it worked out for the future of the franchise. But this type of move, the more times you make it, it's going to work out less often.
For sure.
So, all right, let's move on down the list, bring up some happier subjects. All right. Outside of your team, you're a Browns guy. I'm a Packers guy. Who is your favorite all-time NFL player? Or if you have a couple of them, I do. Who would you say?
First, let me just touch on the Browns draft real quick because it's just
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Very easy. Nothing really to talk about too much, but I know a couple of people have asked me about it. I like it. Solid. They took arguably the best tackle in the draft at 10th overall. Browns needed a stud tackle. Guys from Alabama. He's a monster. Like that pick a lot. Then we took a safety from LSU. I like the Browns draft so far. Anytime you're not really talking about it too much and you just draft guys you need, guys you're kind of expected to take, I think that's what you want. I like what our new GM is doing. He's traded it back a couple of times to pick up extra picks. So, yeah, Browns fever over here. It's all about Baker Mayfield next year. He's definitely set up for success. We'll see how good he can be. We got weapons all over. Yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. As far as my favorite non-Brown of all time, this was easy for me because one of my favorite athletes growing up, I wore 58 in football because of this guy. I wore 58 like all over because of this guy. He's passed away tragically, but that's Derek Thomas. One of the best linebackers ever. Highlight machine. I just love the way he played. I loved everything about his game. If you haven't seen him, haven't heard of him, go check out Derek Thomas of the Chiefs, one of the best linebackers ever.
Yeah, he's one of the better pass rushers of not just our lifetime, but just to ever grace the stage of the NFL. I wouldn't say that I was as big of a fan as you were, but I did like him. He was good. He was real good. For me, I made a list of 3 and ultimately had to decide on a guy. The 3 guys I thought of are Peyton Manning, Barry Sanders, and Rob Gronkowski. I like them all for different reasons. One with Peyton, he's very charismatic. He's funny. His appearance on SNL was great. His commercials were fantastic. He's just a very, very likable individual. He did enough winning that it wasn't like he was a lovable loser, but he didn't win so much he was easy to hate. Then Barry Sanders is just a human highlight film. For some of the younger generation, if you haven't gotten to watch Barry Sanders, as great as some of the moves that you'll see on some of these players, nobody could juke you out of your pants like Barry Sanders. And then Rob Gronkowski just seems like the kind of guy you want to drink multiple beers with. Now, I took Peyton Manning as my favorite, but the reason being is because I hate New England, and Barry Sanders played for the Detroit Lions, which is a division rival. Also, one of the reasons I was able to love Barry Sanders as a Packer fan was, as great as he was, the Lions were never a threat. They always lost. So as much as I hate the Bears and Vikings, I don't hate the Lions quite as much because they were always bad. So I went with Peyton Manning, but those were the 3 guys I thought of.
I get that. All of them likable guys. Barry Sanders is a guy I thought about. Also, I like Peyton Manning too, so nice list.
You can't not watch Barry Sanders and not like his game, right? Like, he's a very likable dude. Walked away from the game early, which is something a lot of us can respect. But, man, the guy just had moves like nobody else we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, let's keep mosing down the list of questions that we're going to bring up today. This is a more difficult one. What would be a reasonable move you can make as the New York Knicks? Now, am I allowed to say that you maroon James Dolan on a desert island somewhere is the move that would be best for New York?
You are not.
Okay, all right. Because that's the number one thing I thought of is, what do we do to get rid of this guy? Where did you go with this question?
I really struggled with this question, so I wanted to hear where you went. I couldn't come up with a reasonable move they can make because they don't make reasonable moves.
Yeah, exactly, because that would be the reasonable move. So I went back to our first question with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and how New York needs a guy that they can actually build upon, because all they seem to do is make desperation moves on a yearly basis. I think we would agree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was the New York Knicks, I would give up any piece on my roster. I would want to use RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson as guys that I would try not to move on from. because I like what they have to offer. But if I'm the Knicks, I'm giving up anybody on my roster. DSJ, Kevin Knox, Julius Randle, Taj Gibson, Frank Ntilikina, and the next 2 first-rounders, which are probably going to be pretty good draft picks, to get Ben Simmons to New York. I don't know that I have enough in my arsenal for Philly, but I think Philly ultimately knows that the marriage of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons isn't going to work. And then I would like somebody that I can build around right there to at least make my team of playoff caliber. I don't know exactly the logistics, but I will give up anybody. And you want to know what? If I got to throw R.J. Barrett or Mitchell Robinson in the mix, I'll do that. But I need a guy I can build on. And I think from the 76ers standpoint, getting multiple first-round picks that are probably going to be decent, potentially lottery picks, I think that could work as well.
So from the Knicks side, I get it for sure, especially if you're keeping Barrett and Robinson. From the Sixers side, like none of those Knicks pieces are attractive at all. It's all about.
What if I give up your next 2 first-round picks, right?
It's all about the picks, about the picks, and the Knicks are bad. So yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think that Philly would do it, but it's reasonable enough. And yeah, I was with you, man. I couldn't narrow down or pinpoint the exact player, but basically give up anyone on your roster aside from the 2 you mentioned, which obviously is their 2 best pieces, which makes it difficult for any sort of like established star like that, a guy that you can build around. I thought about Bradley Beal. Simmons is even a better building block point. So yeah, I'm with you 100% there.
Yeah, because Simmons is a guy, like we mentioned in the first question. I feel like if you get him as your best player, he's a guy that you have to build your team for him to be built around. Very similar to what the Bucks have done with Giannis, right? Surround him with D and 3 guys. If you can get another guy like a Chris Middleton who can take the last shot and create his own shot, he doesn't need to be, an MVP candidate, but he has to be Bradley Beal, Chris Middleton. You mentioned CJ McCollum, who I think is a slightly lesser version of those 2 players. Somebody who can, in the last 2 minutes, I can give him the ball and say, "Man, I need you to make a mid-range shot for me."
For sure.
So, okay. I think we see it similar. I mean, this is a black hole. And there's a couple of, Daniel Snyder's another name that comes to mind, executives or owners that just make things so damn difficult on their team.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're going to be touching on this subject here a little bit for the next 2 questions. We're going to do current players right now. What one young player needs a change in scenery? And actually, the next question will be a little bit different than this one. So, you want to go with any one of your ones first? I got one for each sport.
Sure, me too. I'll go MLB first. This one is an easy one for me, man. I think you'll agree, even if it's not the guy you have. Lewis Brinson. He's got to get out of Miami, where he's in the shadow of getting traded for Christian Yelich. I'm not saying he will be anything, but if he can become anything, it will be with another team. He was highly regarded, top prospect in baseball, so on and so forth. He needs a change of scenery, worse than about anyone I can think of.
Yeah, I can't argue that. I think anybody that plays for Miami probably needs to change the scenery, as that is just really a black hole of franchises. The fact that the Marlins have 2 World Series rings is crazy, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, of all the anomalies in sports, I think the Marlins having 2 rings and Prince Fielder having 2 inside the park home runs are some things that just don't really make any sense. So kudos to those teams for banding together, being good at the right time, and actually getting things done and getting those chips when they were given the opportunity, because this team has sold off assets like a celebrity, being challenged by the IRS, like to the point that we've never seen. So I like that. I actually went like a completely different route. I went with the game's best player in Mike Trout, who I still consider young, but continually gets stuck. And I think it might be different this year. We have higher hopes for the Angels, but he keeps getting stuck on not very good teams. The next thing we know, Mike Trout's going to be 31 and have 0 rings to show for it.
Yeah, you took that question in a little bit of a different way. I can't argue with you. I was just looking at it in a little bit of a different light.
Sure. And I took the next question, which is similar to this one, in a very different way. So I'm excited to get to that one. Baseball's harder, though, because we talked about this when we did some of our lists recently. One guy doesn't win championships in baseball and really does very little even to contribute to it. It needs to be more of a team atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. From an NFL perspective, I went with Deshaun Watson. I know you have been a Bill O'Brien hater, and you seem like Nostradamus right now, because what he has done this offseason has turned this team laughable in a lot of different ways. So I think Deshaun Watson is a guy that I want in my foxhole. I want him on my team. And right now, they went from DeAndre Hopkins to really two skill position guys in David Johnson and Brandon Cooks. Like, yeah, if this was fantasy football 4 years ago, I'd be on board, but it's not.
I agree with you 100%. Deshaun Watson was my number one also. The number two I had, which is maybe a reach, was Kerryon Johnson, especially after Detroit took a running back at the beginning of the second round. I like Kerryon Johnson, and I'm pissed that they took a running back. So he could be better in a new role.
Yeah, okay, I can get on board with that one. I haven't been following the draft that closely. After Green Bay did that in the first round, and I don't have cable right now to watch it live like that, I've just been really turned off by the draft, as desperate as I was for sports. So we do agree on Watson. I don't poo-poo your Kerryon Johnson point in the slightest, but we definitely agree Deshaun Watson. He needs to go somewhere else, and I would demand it if I were him. I would be pissed off about what happened. Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers should call each other and hold each other right now.
Agreed.
All right, from the NBA, I got 2 answers here. Who'd you go with?
NBA answer, I have like 10 answers, and it's insert Nick here. Kind of a follow-up from the last question. All of them. I'm not talking about the Randalls and the Gibson types that are already established, but the Knoxes of the world, the Mitchell Robinsons, the Barretts, all of them. That's where I went.
At least with Barrett, they let him play. But like Kevin Knox is your second-year guy, and he doesn't even get to touch the floor. Why are you not trying to figure out if Dennis Smith Jr. is anything? Like that, if you even want him around, and not to give these guys run. Why is Mitchell Robinson not playing? And I get it, like he still has foul issues, but why is this guy not out there for 34 minutes a game, coming off the bench? I like Taj Gibson. He's a nice piece, but he's a veteran presence that should be somewhere else. Completely mismanaged franchise. I went with Devin Booker or Bradley Beal. I think Bradley Beal is ready right now to be the number 2 on a very quality NBA team. And he's stuck in Washington right now. John Wall hasn't played since the Eisenhower administration. And then we brought up Devin Booker. My only reason that Devin Booker wasn't a firm one is I actually like what Phoenix has tried to build right there. It's just not quite showing in the win column yet.
Agree. Agree with those all over. Another guy that I thought about here was Buddy Hield, who seems to be on the out in Sacramento, but I think could be a good piece somewhere.
I do. I mean, Buddy Hield would look good on a lot of different teams who need a guy that can spread the floor like that.
I mean, imagine him like back on New Orleans right now.
Be a good fit there.
Yeah. So cool.
I mean, he would work on Milwaukee, although most people work on Milwaukee unless they're just trying to clog the lane.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I feel like we can talk about this next question for a while because I definitely took it in a completely different route than I'm imagining that you did. So the question is almost the same one, but it's a little phrased different. What one player in each sport for our lifetime would have had a completely different career if drafted by a different team? And I'll start out by saying that I'm going to go a route, and I don't know if you went this way. I'm going to start with the NFL. I'm going with Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady would have been a very good player and ended up being a quality quarterback no matter where he went. But I don't think he's got a fistful of rings if he goes to any other team that's not New England.
I think you can answer this question with a lot of different quarterbacks. I answered it with
good and bad, right?
Yep, Tim Couch / Tom Brady / David Carr. That's literally what I had to kind of, emphasize that a lot of it depends on where you're drafted.
Right. There aren't a lot of Alex Smiths who go to go number 1 overall and have a very mediocre, boring career. Like you're not going to associate that, but some of the greats and what happened with them. Like I think Peyton Manning was going to be really good no matter where he went, right?
No doubt.
Okay, but like Tom Brady, like what happens to Tom Brady if he's drafted by the Houston Texans? Like, does he ever even a starter?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many guys I feel like you could say that about the NFL too.
Yeah, because the franchise makes such a big difference. Player development, and clearly he got drafted into a great situation. But like, I would be really curious to see what would happen if he went to a disorganized franchise that maybe never even gave him the time of day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not even about like the franchise per se, like how you're talking about it. Like with a guy like him, it's about would he have even been given a shot? Like, so I'm with you 100%. He's probably the ultimate example of that. I'm with you.
Okay, I didn't know which way you were going to go. I thought like you would probably give it the Tim Couch, David Carr answer. I didn't know if you were going to think about it in the inverse way, like I kind of took this question. All right, cool. I'm glad. Moving over to baseball, very, very similar. I went with Derek Jeter, who, again, he's going down in a lot of people's minds, specifically Yankees fans, which is a high population of people, is one of the all-time greats. Where is Derek Jeter in his career if he was drafted and played for the San Diego Padres, right? Like, he's going to be a good player. He was going to find a way to be, bat 300, get his hits, be a doubles machine, steal some bases, hit a couple home runs. But I don't think Derek Jeter is even in the conversation of baseball greats if he hadn't gone to the New York Yankees.
I don't agree, but I don't disagree.
Like, I think he would have been a good player, but he wouldn't have been like on this Mount Rushmore some people have him.
Fair, or maybe he would have taken that other team, like whatever other team that was. Obviously, it's not highly as regarded as the Yankees. So you're right. Like, anytime you're in that situation, putting anyone from the Yankees an all-time on any different team changes their career because it's the Yankees.
Like, think if Derek Jeter played for like those Killer Bees Astros with Bagwell, Biggio, and Berkman, and they happen to win a championship. Like, I think he's just considered one of the guys for a very good team with a bunch of good players. Whereas he gets a lot of credit for those 5 championships he has with the New York Yankees, despite the fact that they were on some good teams. I mean, there were some good players on there, and he could be the leader, but it was one of many. Where did you go?
That's all of baseball, though, as being one of many. So I think your criticism on Jeter might be a little too harsh, but I don't have anything resounding traits about him. Where I went is kind of the inverse, a guy that should have had a good career, and not necessarily the franchise messed it up, but I think he could have been one of the great pitchers of all time. And you could throw 2 guys on here, but the one I went with is Mark Pryor. Kind of had a lot of that like Steven Strasburg hype coming up, and then really fizzled out because the Cubs mismanaged him. A lot of the same that we saw on Kerry Wood. So that's where I went. I agree with both sides of the coin, though.
Mark Pryor was really good. So I used to be a Cubs fan. So I know some of you guys know that. Reason being, I grew up with the Cubs in the NL and the Brewers in the AL, so I could be a fan of both. And then when the Brewers moved over, I was living in Minneapolis, so I wasn't really watching them a ton. So I was a Cubs fan for a long time, and I watched the Pryor Wood closely. And I mean, those guys were great and fizzled out real early.
Yeah, real early.
Especially Pryor. Kerry Wood at least had a nice 6 or 7 years. Pryor was like 2 years and done.
Mm-hmm.
All right. For basketball, I had a lot harder time answering this question. I was trying to look at some guys who are more of bust, but also the problem is in basketball, guys move around so much unless they are great. They don't stick with the same team. So I don't see it the same way that like a football player, when he fizzles out, he's usually over. I went with Tim Duncan, and let me kind of explain myself for the reasoning for this. So Tim Duncan is a great NBA player. I think the perfect place for him to go was the marriage with Greg Popovich. I think there's a good chance Duncan might have found a way to win a championship or two if he had gone somewhere else, but not for sure, because he's not a dominant wing player like a Kobe or a LeBron, which are a lot of times that we see in current NBA, the guys winning championships. He was the perfect fundamental player. I think the marriage with Popovich and the guys they put around him are perfect. Not saying he went to win a championship or two somewhere else, but I think he gets all those rings because it was a perfect spot for him.
It was a perfect spot for him, but that's what it takes in the NBA. I don't know about that. He wasn't like the dominant big man like the Shaq, but he was like one of the most hyped guys coming out, like the clear number 1 pick. It was the perfect marriage, but San Antonio had an amazing big man before that, and David Robinson, and they could never win a title with just him.
Sure, and I think Duncan's great because I'm not poo-pooing Duncan, but I think it's very possible he has more of Dirk's career, which is always good, always competitive, managed to get the 1 ring in the right situation, but not, a fistful of them.
For sure. That's a good one. The NBA was hard. I really struggled to come up with one guy because it's just a different type of I mean, I thought about like LeBron, but how much different would it have really been? It obviously would have been different because it was not Cleveland. It would have been different for me, but I don't think that's a fair answer.
Right. LeBron was going to be great no matter where he went.
Yeah, you got to believe that. So, yeah, I like where you went there.
Yeah, the NBA took me a long time to think about it because, even like with Devin Booker, Devin Booker could be somewhere else any day, right? And like he could have a great or terrible NBA career moving forward, depending on where he went. With the NBA, the guys only stick around if greatness is being achieved, and that's why it was definitely a harder question to answer.
For sure.
So like in football, like the average player only plays 3 years because their bodies get hurt or, guys are comparable and stuff like that. NBA is just a little bit of a different beast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here's a question for you. I think we all know that I watch baseball, basketball, football at a professional level very closely. but don't pay a lot of attention outside of that. You follow the same professional sports, but also dip that down into college basketball and college football. If you had to pick up one sport and no League of Legends doesn't count to follow closely, you think you'd be interested, where would you go?
None of the other sports really interest me, so I went with golf just because I've heard that. First off, I'd like to play more golf, assuming we ever get out of this quarantine. Not that I love golf, but it's a good thing to do. And then I've heard it's really fun for DFS purposes. So that's where I went. Pretty simple, short and sweet there. What about you?
Okay. And I think golf is a good one for us as DFS providers because I believe it's the fourth biggest. Don't quote me on that. I don't know that. It's possible it's hockey or anything else, but I think golf is right there. And golf was definitely up there for me, what I consider, because I used to play a lot of golf growing up. I do enjoy playing it. I haven't played in a couple of years, but other than that, I'd never gone a year in my life without playing golf up until recently. I went with MMA, and the big reasoning is, for me, my son got into wrestling about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've really started to enjoy learning more about the individual fighting styles and breaking it down from a technical perspective, as opposed to just, two guys out there beating the crap out of each other. So I think I could get interested in it if I learn more about it. But as of right now, I'm beyond even being a novice.
I get that.
In the bad direction. I don't know much about it.
Yeah, it doesn't interest MMA, and that doesn't interest me all that much, but I get it, man. I mean, it makes sense.
Okay. And I wasn't either. But when you watch your kid wrestling and then you see some more advanced play, you understand like what they're doing to set them up for a move, in 20 seconds or whatever it might be. It is kind of interesting to me. I also feel like I would have been a good wrestler if I'd ever played it when I was younger, and then the other fighting styles that go into it. So it's mostly just because my kid's been involved in something that's, part of it.
For sure. For easy.
All right. So the last question, we are going to deviate away from sports for a little bit, and I want to let's kind of set the stage for this question. So 99% of the people who watch this show are going to be dudes, and probably mostly straight dudes at that. So I wanted to talk about what would be your top advice, and this can be coming from a married man perspective or maybe from a guy who was single back in the day, to other guys out there when it comes to the difficulties of dealing with the females. And again, if women were listening to this too, I feel like we could probably help out there as well. And just what would be your one piece of advice you would give to other guys about dealing with women that might make their lives easier?
This mostly applies to single guys, but it applies for everything in life. It applies to me. It applies to you. It applies to my wife. It applies to everything in life. But I know that this can kind of be an issue with some guys, not necessarily in it, not having not enough of it, having too much of it. So the advice that I would give is be confident, but not cocky. Simple as that. Girls want a guy who is confident in himself, but not someone who rubs it in their face. Obviously, we could go on for hours talking about stuff that we've been through and learned throughout the years, but I think that that's really important just in general, and especially when you're trying to meet someone.
Agreed 100%. So we've always heard women refer to liking men that are confident, right, from the beginning of time. It works both ways, though, because, I mean, if there happens to be any women listening to this, men are also attracted to confidence, and at least most men, at least confident men are attracted to confidence in women as well. It's a very admirable trait for people to have. And it's not just men being confident around women, but men being confident around other men and women being confident around other women. It is a great trait to have. And it's a difficult thing for somebody who's not confident. I don't really struggle in that area, but how do you teach somebody to be confident? You know what I mean? But it is something that if you're not, you got to figure out what it is that you need in your life in order to make yourself feel more confident about what it is that you're talking about, or just in general.
Amen.
So, and you're right, though. It's a tough line to walk, confident versus cocky, because you're right. That's not what people look for. Maybe very, very young women.
You're cocky, and you want people to be confident. No, I'm just kidding. It's a very fine line to walk, because you want to present yourself and you want to be confident in yourself, but you never want to rub it in someone's face, I guess is the best way to put it.
All right, so I got a couple things I was going to touch on really briefly, and I'll start with one. Stop sending pictures of your junk that are unsolicited to guys who are doing that. It has a success rate of well under 1%. The way more likely scenario is she's going to screenshot it, send it to her friends, and they're going to laugh at you. It doesn't work. If you've tried it before, it's still not going to work. So just stop. It has such a low success rate. Let's not do it. The next thing I wanted to bring up, and this goes for people who have been married for 50 years or somebody going out on a first date, and that is almost all women make plans. Don't ask them, well, what do you want to do? Pick the restaurant. Pick what it is you guys are going to do. A female would rather you took a shot on something that she didn't enjoy. Now, again, this doesn't mean take her to an MMA fight if you know she won't be interested in, but pick a situation, make the plans, take her out, pay for it, pick it up. Every woman, whether she's been married for 50 years or going on a first date, loves a man who is confident, makes plans so that she isn't stuck trying to figure out a way to entertain you.
Amen. I love it, man. It's true. It definitely gets to the point I'm thinking about now where, like, I definitely just, like, it's different during this quarantine, right? Because, like, there isn't any plans to make.
Yeah, exactly. This is a weird time.
But you're right. I mean, Sam definitely appreciates when I just make plans. Like, you're right. It doesn't really matter what they are. So I agree with you 100%.
Right. And again, if there is any women listening to this, don't berate a guy on making plans if you're not interested in, because we're going to get him to a point where he's not going to try. And this definitely changes for people who have been married for a while. If she complains about everything, then he stops wanting to make an effort, but he also stops wanting to take any chances on doing anything, because if he doesn't get it right, she's just going to complain and demean him. So if there is any women listening to that, you act that way, maybe you'll wonder why it is that your guy doesn't go out of his way to make plans anymore.
Exactly. That's a slippery slope too.
It is a slippery slope, and relationships are tough for both men, women, straight, gay, doesn't matter. It's not easy, but I'm yet to meet a young woman at any point of her life who doesn't love it if a guy's like, hey, I got tickets to a comedy show. Let's go here for dinner. It's at 7:00 on Friday. She's like, boom, let's do it.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, and the last point I'll bring up, again, this isn't specific to men or women either, but a lot of you guys know I'm new to the dating world again. We talked about this the other day because I was telling you one of the first things I heard I was getting back out there is that ghosting people has become it's always been a thing that existed, but it's become a serious issue, especially with the younger generation. And what I want to encourage people to do is don't do that. It is so much easier on both the other person, but also on yourself. If you've been talking to somebody and like you're not feeling it anymore and like you're avoiding their text and phone calls or tweets or Instagram or Snapchats or whatever it is that you all talk on right there, do you know how easy it is just to, quite frankly, just in whatever nice way you want to be, but hey, I'm just not that interested anymore. Everybody feels better. I don't like, if I go on a first date and I know I'm not that into it, I do not enjoy sending the text message being like, hey, I just am not feeling it. I didn't feel the love connection or whatever. Well, but do you know how much better I feel about myself after actually sending that and knowing that I actually gave an explanation instead of just avoiding them? I had somebody tell that to me once, and she's like, hey, I just didn't feel it. I felt great about that. It was one of the best dating experiences I've ever had.
I don't disagree, but the only thing I'll caution you with is kind of something that I mentioned in my tip or whatever, like someone who's not confident. I understand why people do it. I think it's wrong. But also avoiding confrontation is a thing, man. And not everyone can take, I'm just not that interested as well as you can. Like people don't take that well. And why? And it's like, I don't want to deal with that shit. So I get it. And that's why people ghost people, is because people can't handle it. So,
and I know why it happens. Trust me, I don't enjoy hearing it or saying it, but I definitely feel better about myself as a human being if I hear the other side or when I say the other side. And I think most people would agree. Like you talked about a situation when we discussed this the other day, something like way back in your life. You would have just felt way better if there had been a conversation based around this, correct?
For sure.
And if you ever, let's face it, we've all done it, right? And I've been better this time around, but I definitely feel terrible about the way that I treated some women when I was younger, when a simple conversation or even just a text message would have given them a lot of closure that I was never willing to offer, and I was just a real douchebag about it.
There's a difference, though, for me. I've definitely ghosted people that I hooked up with or whatever. To ghost someone that you, dated for months, Like, that's shitty as hell. Like, that's different.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. There are different levels of this. And when I talk about it, like online dating is really common these days.
Like,
so like if you have like 2 days of conversations with somebody and you're just not into them, like you don't owe them something. But if you've gone out 2 or 3 times, and it's different too if like you just both mutually stop talking to one another. But like if somebody texts you 3 times, like respond to them. You know what I mean? Like at least just do the right thing and be like, hey, I'm just not that into you.
for sure. I agree with you. This was fun. I'm getting text from my wife that I got to go do something with her. So this was a good topic to talk about.
Well, I would say, Matt, I would respond to her and not just leave her hanging.
Well, I'm going to go actually help her because we're seem to be done anyways.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Thought we would try to switch up. We like to do something different on the last questions, but y'all have yourselves a good Saturday. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.